Sergeant Kara Lawson had always been quiet. Not shy, never that. But there was a stillness about her that made people underestimate her. At Fort Bragg, where most of the men and women in her unit were loud, brash and eager to prove themselves, Kara's silence was a target. "Hey, silent type," a fellow trainee jeered one morning as they ran drills in the humid Carolina heat. "Did you even hear the briefing, or are you planning to nap through it?" Laughter rippled through the group. Kara didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that words spoken in anger or mockery were easy to ignore. It was the actions that mattered, but that didn't make the taunts sting any less. Her first day with the SEAL Support Unit, a rare position for a woman, especially one so young and quiet, was met with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and outright ridicule. Most men assumed she was there for administrative work. They called her the clipboard girl behind her back. They whispered she wouldn't survive the rigorous physical training, let alone handle the mental strain of operational missions. Kara heard it all, every whispered doubt and every mocking laugh. She had grown up in a small town in North Carolina, the daughter of a single mother who had taught her to fight not with fists but with determination. "Let them underestimate you, Kara," her mother had said, tightening her grip on her daughter's shoulders the day she left for the military academy. "They'll never see you coming," and Kara had taken that advice to heart. She was fast, disciplined, and precise. But precision doesn't make noise. Quiet doesn't earn instant respect, and so for weeks she endured the sneers and the jokes, keeping her focus on the work, the drills, and the impossible tests she had to pass to even be noticed. Then came the day that marked everything. It was a routine training exercise, or so it seemed. The unit was deployed to a mock urban environment designed to simulate hostage rescue scenarios and high-stakes extraction missions. Kara's job was simple: observe, report, and assist. But as the team navigated the narrow streets and simulated bombed-out buildings, chaos erupted. One of the male trainees, loud and reckless as always, tried to lead a breach without waiting for backup. The hostage was in danger. He froze for a second, then stumbled, and suddenly it became real. Someone was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the scenario was spinning out of control. Everyone looked to Kara. Not because they respected her, they didn't, but because she had been the closest to the radio console, the one holding the operational codes, the communications keys that only a select few were trained to use. "Use the code," one of the instructors barked. "Now!" Kara's fingers hovered over the keypad. Her mouth was dry. This was the moment where years of training and silence would either matter or it wouldn't. And then she remembered something her SEAL instructor had drilled into her. Precision and patience under pressure were everything. The men snickered behind her. "What, you're gonna whisper the magic words?" one said. "We all know you can't even crack a joke, let alone a code." Her silence lasted another heartbeat. But in that heartbeat, something shifted. She wasn't just Kara, the quiet girl in the corner. She was Kara, the one who had survived every impossible obstacle to get here. She pressed the sequence perfectly, fluidly, an encrypted code only SEALs were taught. A code that no outsider could ever guess, and the doors unlocked. In an instant, the chaos reversed. The hostage was safe, the simulated threat neutralized. Everyone froze, staring at Kara with wide eyes. The man who had mocked her, the loudmouth who had called her a clipboard girl, opened his mouth and then shut it. There were no words, no teasing, just the quiet realization that she had done exactly what they hadn't thought she could. For the first time, her silence carried weight. It was not ignorance. It was not weakness. It was focus and power and precision. And in that moment, Kara realized something profound. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about knowing she could be trusted when it truly mattered. Later that evening, back at the barracks, the whispers started to change. Not all at once. Some men still doubted her, but a few approached her quietly. "Kara didn't think you had it in you," one admitted, voice low. Kara smiled faintly, saying nothing. She didn't need to. Silence, she had learned, spoke louder than any words ever could. But Kara also knew this was only the beginning. Mockery might fade in the face of proof, but real danger, the kind that comes in the dark, unpredictable corners of a mission, would demand more than a single act of courage. And Kara was ready for it, because now they had all learned one truth: underestimate her at your own peril. Days turned into weeks at Fort Bragg. but the echoes of Kara's code sequence victory lingered. The mock exercise had ended, but the subtle shift in the unit's attitude hadn't yet fully settled. Some men nodded respectfully in her presence now. Others lingered with suspicion, unwilling to accept that a quiet woman could be their equal, let alone a savior in a crisis. Kara ignored it all. Respect earned under duress was fleeting. Real trust was proven over time in situations that demanded more than nerves, more than knowledge, more than raw strength. And she would get that chance sooner than anyone expected. It began on a gray morning, the kind of overcast sky that makes everything feel heavier, more urgent. Kara and her team were briefed on a high-risk urban extraction exercise at a nearby abandoned industrial complex. The exercise was supposed to simulate a hostage scenario, but the instructors had made it clear they were stepping it up. This wasn't a routine drill. Mistakes would have consequences. The moment they arrived, the tension was palpable. The complex was a crumbling skeleton of brick and steel, shadows filling every corner. The unit split into teams. Kara's was assigned to surveillance and communications, a role she had always excelled at. But even within that limited role, she could sense the skepticism in the eyes of her teammates. "Don't screw this up," one of the louder men muttered as they moved toward the command post. His tone wasn't friendly. It was a challenge. Kara met his gaze briefly, then returned to her work. Words could be ignored, actions could not. The first few minutes were routine, monitoring cameras, reporting positions, but then the scenario escalated. A simulated hostage scream pierced the stale air. The opposing team, a group of seasoned trainees known for pushing limits, had breached the perimeter faster than expected. One of Kara's teammates panicked, fumbling a tactical radio call, and suddenly the simulated hostage was in immediate danger. Everyone looked at Kara. The code. Only Kara knew it. It was a fail-safe sequence, designed to override the chaos and guide the rescue team safely to the hostage. The men who had mocked her waited expectantly, some with genuine worry, others with veiled doubt. "Now, Kara," the instructor barked. "Only you can stop this before it goes wrong." Her fingers danced over the keypad, but this time her mind raced faster than her hands. The stakes felt real because they were. One wrong move could compromise the entire exercise. And in the simulation, compromise could mean failure. In reality, it meant proving whether she belonged here or not. "Go on," the mocking teammate whispered behind her, voice low enough that no instructor could hear. "Let's see if all that silence was worth anything." Kara's jaw tightened. She didn't respond. Instead, she visualized the code, each step drilled into her muscle memory from months of practice. The first sequence triggered, then the second, then the final override. The complex's locked doors opened remotely, escape routes cleared. The unit moved in, swiftly and efficiently, saving the simulated hostage without a single casualty. The instructors erupted with approval, clapping and shouting, but Kara barely noticed. She was aware only of the stunned silence behind her. The same men who had doubted her, who had whispered and laughed, now looked at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Good work, Lawson," one said finally, voice tight. Never thought you could do that in a live scenario." Kara didn't smile. She only nodded because gratitude from them wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she had acted decisively, without hesitation when everyone else's doubt hung heavy in the air. But as she walked away from the control console, a gnawing tension settled in her chest. This had been a controlled exercise, a simulation. In real operations, the stakes would be higher, the consequences far more severe. And Kara knew the moment would come when her skills wouldn't just earn respect, they would save lives. That night, back at the barracks, she sat alone on her bunk, reviewing the day's events. The silence of her room contrasted sharply with the noise of doubt she had endured all day. Yet even in solitude, she felt a quiet determination welling inside her. She remembered her mother's words. "They'll never see you coming." But this time, Kara realized the lesson had a second layer. It wasn't enough to survive doubt. She had to anticipate danger, act decisively when no one expected it, and use every skill she had learned to turn the tide in impossible situations. That was the true test, and it was coming. 2 days later, she got the call. Not a simulation, not an exercise, a real mission. The operation required a small, elite team to infiltrate a suburban compound in North Carolina, suspected of harboring armed militants. Intelligence was scarce, risk was high, and Kara had been selected, not as a backup, not as support, but as the communications lead, the one who could access encrypted channels and coordinate extraction. Her teammates looked at her differently now, some with respect, some with skepticism, and some quietly, with envy. But Kara had learned that in missions like this, envy was irrelevant. All that mattered was precision, courage, and silence, the kind of silence that masked focus, not fear. As she packed her gear, Kara's mind flashed back to that first day at Fort Bragg, when they called her the clipboard girl. She thought of every insult, every snide remark, every whispered doubt, and she smiled just a little, because they hadn't understood something fundamental. Mockery could never touch the person who had trained herself to act when the stakes were life and death. The night before deployment, she stayed up reviewing protocols and codes, ensuring she was ready. She knew some of the men would still doubt her in the field. But she also knew that doubts didn't matter once the action began. And tomorrow they would see her not just as the quiet girl, not just as a survivor of ridicule, but as the lifeline of their operation. Because the code, the silence, and the skill that others mocked would be the very things that saved lives when everything went wrong. The morning air was sharp, tinged with the smell of damp earth and diesel engines as Kara and her team approached the suburban compound. From the outside it looked innocuous, well-kept lawns, white picket fences, but intelligence reports painted a very different picture. Armed men, heavily fortified with hostages potentially inside. Kara's heart beat steadily, not from fear but from focus. This was the moment where everything she had trained for, the months of mock drills, the endless codes, the whispers and laughter she had endured, would be tested in real life. Her silence, once mocked, would now be her weapon. The team split according to the plan. Kara stationed herself in a van a few blocks away, her eyes on multiple screens and her hands on encrypted keyboards. The real-time feeds from surveillance drones flickered across her monitors. Every movement inside the compound was magnified, every shadow a potential threat. Team Alpha, proceed with caution. Intel indicates multiple armed suspects. The mission coordinator's voice crackled over the comms. Kara adjusted the code sequences on the fly, ensuring secure channels while coordinating entry points and extraction paths. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, the first gunfire erupted. The simulation drills could never have prepared her for this. The chaos, the unpredictability, the raw fear in real voices as her teammates called for directions. One of the men, Jackson, panicked as he encountered armed resistance. "Come on, Kara. I need the code," he shouted over the comms. His voice strained with tension. Her fingers flew. One wrong keystroke, one delayed command, and the whole mission could collapse. But Kara had done this 1,000 times in drills. This time lives were real. Then came a moment that would stay with her forever. A door inside the compound locked down unexpectedly. The team's path to the hostages was blocked, and a dangerous standoff was imminent. Kara's screen showed her teammates pinned down, bullets ricocheting against walls. The men who had doubted her, who had mocked her silence, were now relying entirely on her. She inhaled slowly, centering herself. Her silence was no longer a sign of weakness, it was clarity, focus. Every code she typed, every command she executed was precise. And then, with a single keystroke sequence, she unlocked the critical entry points, opening a path for Team Alpha to reach the hostages. Inside the compound, chaos erupted, but Kara's planning held firm. She guided her team, issuing calm, direct instructions, her voice steady and unwavering. Her teammates followed, their earlier doubts replaced with a trust that had been earned under fire. Minutes later, the hostages were safe, escorted out of the compound by her teammates. The armed suspects were contained, and the mission concluded without a single casualty. A flawless operation, executed under the most extreme pressure. When the adrenaline faded, Kara finally allowed herself to breathe. Her colleagues looked at her differently now, not with mere respect but with awe. The man who had called her the clipboard girl approached quietly, avoiding eye contact at first. "Kara," he began, hesitant. I didn't think anyone could handle that. Especially not like you." She smiled faintly, not out of pride but understanding. She had never needed to prove herself to him. The proof had always been in her actions. The silent strength, the quiet focus had spoken louder than any words ever could. But the mission had left its mark. Kara couldn't ignore the lingering doubts that still existed outside the compound, the subtle ways some men still tried to challenge her. She knew respect wasn't permanent. It was earned every single day in every action and every choice. And she would continue to earn it, silently, decisively. That evening, as the sun set over the base, Kara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the mocking voices at Fort Bragg to the critical mission that had saved lives, every challenge had forged her into the soldier she had become. Her silence was no longer a shield to hide behind. It was a weapon, a tool of clarity, a force that had shaped the course of events. And yet, deep down, Kara knew the real test was never the mission itself. It was the prejudice, the underestimation, the constant need to prove that her presence was not only valid but vital. And she was ready, always ready, because she had learned the most important lesson of all. Power didn't come from loud declarations or bravado. It came from focus, courage, and the kind of quiet strength that no one could mock. As she closed her laptop and prepared to rest, Kara allowed herself a small, private smile. The next time someone doubted her, the next time someone mocked her silence, they would learn, just as they had today, that underestimating her came at a cost. And she was more than willing to show them. Tomorrow, the world might see her as quiet, unassuming, perhaps even timid. But she knew the truth. Her silence was her power, and no one would ever take that away. The days after the mission passed in a blur of debriefings, minor accolades, and cautious glances. Kara had saved lives, but in the military world, respect was never fully granted. It had to be continually proven. Even now, some of her teammates still struggled to see her as more than the quiet girl who got lucky. Then came the call that would change everything. It was an urgent situation in a neighboring town. Local authorities had reported a heavily armed gang holding civilians in a secluded warehouse. The situation was volatile. Lives were at stake, and Kara's unit was deployed immediately. This was no drill, no exercise. The stakes were real, and this time Kara knew that her silence and skill would be tested like never before. The team approached the warehouse under the cover of night. The streets empty, the only sounds the wind and their careful footsteps. Kara stationed herself in the command van, monitoring drones and coordinating entry points. She could feel the tension radiating through her teammates, particularly the man who had mocked her so many times in the past. He moved with hesitation, unsure, glancing at her as if hoping she might falter. But Kara didn't flinch. Her focus was absolute. Every eye on her, every doubting glance fueled her concentration rather than shaking it. She adjusted the codes for the locks, confirmed the tactical paths, and waited for the precise moment to act. Then it happened. A gunshot echoed from inside the warehouse. Civilians screamed. Chaos erupted. Her team inside was pinned down. The mocking teammate's voice came over the comms, tight and panicked. "Kara!" The doors jammed. The hostages. Her fingers flew across the keypad, entering the exact sequence that only she could execute. Every code, every override perfectly timed. The security system of the warehouse yielded to her command. Doors opened, lights flashed, paths cleared. In the warehouse, Team Alpha moved swiftly, extracting the civilians with surgical precision. The armed suspects, surprised and disoriented, were captured without a single casualty. Every action Kara coordinated was perfect, every move seamless. When the mission concluded, the team gathered outside under the cold light of dawn, exhausted but alive. And in that moment, the mocking man finally approached Kara. His usual bravado was gone, replaced by an unsteady awe. I don't even know what to say," he admitted. You saved all of us. Saved them. I never should have doubted you." Kara looked at him calmly, her expression steady. "You don't have to say anything. Just remember this. Underestimate anyone at your own risk. It wasn't just him. Others in the unit had watched her throughout the mission, seen her act decisively, and realized the truth. The quiet girl, the one they had mocked and whispered about, had been the backbone of the operation. Every life saved, every obstacle overcome was because of her skill, courage, and focus. Later, in the debriefing room, the commanding officer addressed the team. "Special recognition goes to Sergeant Kara Lawson. Her decisive action and mastery of the SEAL codes ensured mission success and saved civilian lives. This is exactly the standard we need. This is leadership. This is courage. Kara's name was met with applause, but she barely reacted. She didn't need applause. She had already proven in every heartbeat, in every silent decision, that she was capable. Respect had been earned, not through words, but through action. As she walked back to her quarters, Kara allowed herself a small smile. The mocking, the doubt, the disbelief, it had all been a crucible, refining her into someone stronger, sharper, unstoppable. She realized that her silence wasn't a handicap. It was a weapon, a shield, a focus. And now, everyone knew it. That night, she stood on the balcony of the barracks, looking over the base as the sun dipped behind the horizon. Somewhere in the shadows, she imagined the men who had doubted her, now silent and reflective, understanding the cost of underestimation. And in that moment, Kara felt the quiet triumph that had been hers all along. The world had mocked her silence until she spoke the code only she was trained to know. And when she did, it wasn't just a code that saved lives, it was a statement that nobody, ever again, would underestimate Kara Lawson, because silence, she had learned, could be louder than words, and courage, she had proven, could come from the quietest of voices.